Started. Hello, my name's Carter Hahn.
I'm Cade Goodman.
I'm
I'm
Sophia.
Logan.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm Logan Burrington.
And I'm Kayla. Okay.
Awesome. So the first question is, in what ways does Muhammad Ali's interview highlight white privilege, as you learned about in the module? Why is it significant that this interview is decades old? Why would I include this in the course?
Well, oh, sorry, you can go.
Sure. I'm sorry.
All right. Okay, sorry. I'll just go then. So I mean, for this question, like I thought about it, like I thought it was interesting that in terms of white privilege, as a white person myself, like it's something that I don't really think about that often. Like just hearing about like all his different examples, like for example, all the angels are white, Jesus is white, the Pope is white. It's something like growing up, like I never really thought about, and it was just something that's like, okay, yeah, so what? Like they're all white. It's like I never thought about, hey, they're all white and there's no black angels at all, and I think it's something that like if you're a painter or you're someone who's religious and you're painting a picture of white angels, I don't think it's something that that person is specifically saying like black people can't be angels. I just think it's something that they grew up with, so it's just something they're naturally doing and inclined to do. So I don't think it's like a direct form of racism, like black people can't do this. I just think it's some like a form of colorblind racism where it's something that they aren't consciously aware that they're doing, but it's something that black people might be picking up on and thus might feel discriminated or stereotyped against. So I definitely think it's something that like as a white person, you should definitely look into and just think about like different factors that you might not even be aware of that could be hurting or discriminating against other people.
Yeah, it's about like consciously being aware of what you're doing, what you're saying, so not to offend anyone, even if you don't mean it.
Yeah, I think over time, like just the representation, like puts this idea in people's head that like that's like how it's supposed to be. So like even if you don't realize like you're doing it, like it still can harm other people.
Kind of going off what Logan said about colorblind racism. Muhammad Ali was kind of touching up on how like a lot of the good aspects are described with like white, and a lot of like bad like aspects are like described with like black. Like like dark would be represented with evil, white represented with like good, and like indirect things like that that like we don't really, or at least I don't really like think about off the bat. It's really eye-opening to see Muhammad Ali growing up and really take that into perspective, because that could really affect someone and how they live. And uh, the interview being decades old um, says a lot. How like this isn't a new topic; it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and I think she included it in this course because it shows like since it's so old, um, like 1971, I believe, and that's like 50 years ago. So today we still have problems in media where like whites are like the standard. And it's weird because like I'm not white, but growing up, like I didn't even realize that like I would just be like, oh yeah, like everything is white. And I never thought like, oh, like why didn't I have any representation? So like the fact that he like realized that was like really good that it's like something we need to change, and we're so used to just like white people being like, the standard good versus evil. So I think it's really important that in this course to include white privilege prevalent in media.
Yeah, and it's also kind of cool seeing like it was Muhammad Ali, because he's known for a lot. I mean, I'm pretty sure he didn't do the draft because like he didn't like the way he was being treated. And he's like, I'm not going to stand for a country that doesn't stand for me. And it's cool seeing like such a statement coming from someone as influential and like prominent as he was back then.
Yeah, and it also like it shows that athletes they could be more than just athletes. You know, like a lot of athletes nowadays, they get hate for speaking out, speaking their mind, like politically, speaking up against racism, all these things, just because people think they're athletes and they can't, like they have no say in this. But I think Muhammad Ali and these other athletes that are doing that are kind of opening the door for future generations to keep improving upon this topic.
Yeah, I feel like he definitely like paved the way for other athletes to then speak up about topics like that, because I feel like he took so much of like the backlash for it. So he like kind of took that initial backlash so that other people could speak up, which I think is really cool.
You guys want to move on to the actually, sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, I totally agree. And I think that it was especially helpful that like it was him like that did it, because there are many other athletes who aren't as good, who if they did the same thing, like they wouldn't have been heard or seen, or it wouldn't have improved the situation as much. But because he was such a famous athlete already, his words and like what he did was so much more influential than basically any other athlete of the time.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that you have to have that big of a platform to speak out on these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like it's kind of stupid.
Yeah, and I feel like it puts athletes. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry.
You're good. You can go ahead.
I was just thinking like the other kind of weird aspect of kind of like thinking about the video that like happened a while back. I mean, like today there's social media, like can spread like wildfire. Back then, like unless you were watching that like exact video, like there's really no way to see like people speaking out necessarily like that. So
yeah,
it's kind of cool to see how like we now have the technology to kind of be more aware that people are kind of feeling like this, and it's good for knowing what we have to do.
Yeah, I agree. And that kind of leads into like the second question too, with like, do you think, or like why athletes act as social activists? And sometimes I think like, is it their like responsibility to, because sometimes like they can like get kicked off a team for speaking up. And so do you think it's necessarily like, for example, like a Black athlete's responsibility to speak out against racism?
I don't know. That's a hard
that's a really
thing
hard
to
question.
answer. Because I feel like they are on, like, they have this like privilege to be on this platform where people will listen to them. So it is beneficial when like they speak out. But also I feel like they are there to play the sport. But I feel like nowadays it kind of goes hand in hand. So it just depends.
Yeah, that's true.
It's definitely hard because yeah. Oh, want to go?
Sorry, I was gonna.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's hard because it puts a lot of pressure on the athletes. You know, like some people might just be like, oh, I just want to go play the sport and have a good time. But then there's that also like pressure that, oh, should I speak out? And you can also, I think the hardest part is even if you do want to speak out, you can face so much backlash, and it's just so many pressures from different angles, and it's not fair.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know, like I like that question, but it's definitely like a complicated one. I think if you're doing something like what Colin Kaepernick did a couple of years ago when he kneeled for the flag, like to do something like that and to like completely ruin your career for something like that, I don't think it's everyone's responsibility necessarily to do, because then I don't know, like unless everyone did it, then you're basically harming yourself, and you don't know if it's going to help at all. But I do definitely think it's everyone's responsibility to do like minor things, like just for yourself, like I guess don't be racist and just look at what you're doing and how you're treating others and just do it on a more personal level, because that's something easy that everyone can do without any repercussions to themselves.
Yeah, the pressure shouldn't fall on just one person.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Especially if it took them
I
like
think
so
too.
there.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. If
No,
it
go ahead.
took to get there, they have to sacrifice everything when like it's already so hard for them to be in this position. Yeah, I agree.
I think too, like the organizations themselves, like the people that run the NBA or the NFL, like for a long time they didn't do a good job of like supporting their athletes in like the movements that they were involved in, or like with Colin Kaepernick, they kind of just like let it happen, like let him ruin his like career for doing something that he believed was right. And like now they have made like a statement that they like will support their athletes that want to peacefully protest. So I think it just like Colin Kaepernick was the first one to do that, and like that's why he got all the backlash, kind of like Muhammad Ali. But he did like make it easier for other people to stand up for what they believe in. So
Yeah, I think something cool too. Just from like activism and stuff, I feel uh like that like the NBA, they're making it easier for like athletes to stand up for what they believe in. So I'm pretty sure last year, like if a player wanted to, they could put like a statement of their choice on their back
Yeah.
if they wanted to speak up. And like even on the court, they had different like different things they'd say. And yeah, I think kind of like with the support of the actual like industry, it's becoming easier for everybody to speak out against what's happening.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's the first time anything like that has happened on such a big scale, like the names on the backs and all the activism going on. It was really cool to see.
yeah, so
Also,
I think
oh yeah, go for
oh,
it.
go ahead.
No, you go.
I think athlete activism, it works, but it just takes a while to work. And I think the more that athletes that are involved in it is really what helps people like see like, oh, they all think this, and so we should too, kind of thing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, last time I recorded, I didn't look at the time. Like none of our group members did when we started, so we're just like, oh, this is long enough. So does anybody know when we started? Just like a check-in.
We have 12 minutes until the 25-minute mark, and kind of like 5 more minutes time. Do whatever.
Gotcha.
For the critical race question, or the critical race theory question, I was just thinking, because it asks through critical race theory, can athlete activism work? And I kind of took that like, will athletes stand up for what they believe in? And I think it will work because there was multiple steps in the critical race theory, one of them being analyze, deconstruct, and transform. And kind of through an athlete's life, that can be kind of like, that can kind of be seen as like an athlete is able to analyze what they've been through, deconstruct that, and transform at the highest level what they've seen. And kind of just thinking through that, I think athlete activism can work.
Yeah, I also think athlete activism can work because like they're in these positions. Like for example, Jeremy Lin in basketball breaks like the racial ideology surrounding Asians, that like, you know, like they're more like intellectual and like don't play sports, but him being like getting into the NBA and being really good just shows to like Asian Americans that it is possible. And I think it also shows other people too, like all races, that like the stereotypes put on races really don't mean anything. And it is like hard because he's like the only like really super big Asian like face of like basketball in the past few years. But I just hope that more people will be able to join into these like organizations to break the ideology surrounding race.
I think that too relates to like the idea of like stacking sports and how like certain positions within sports or like certain sports, like it's typically like one race is like more prominent than the others in like certain positions, like especially football. Like I remember she talked about in like the lecture how like quarterbacks are often like white because like just people like see it as like they're more competent to like be a leader and make decisions. So I think like with people like breaking those stereotypes, it'll help others to see like, oh, like there's not just one type of person who should be playing this position.
Yeah, I said a similar thing. Like I talked about sports stacking in terms of like the like analyze, deconstruct, transform. I saw that as like the analyze part. Like these athletes can I guess it's similar to like an interactionist theory perspective that like these people are like using their experiences and saying, hey, like there are more black people in this position and there are more white people in this position. Like, why is that? And then these athletes are realizing, hey, that's probably because of some form of racial discrimination in my sport. So then using that knowledge, you're like I have to do something about this. This is my sport, like I have to stand up for it. So that's when they start to use their own positions of power to cause change and influence over others.
Do you guys have any personal experiences with racism, white privilege in the context of sport?
Not directly. Actually, a little bit. Like, uh, I'm Japanese and I played basketball. So in high school, like I would get all these like racist chants when I'm at the free throw line and stuff like that. It's pretty brutal. But it was also like typical. I feel like, especially basketball, people would say anything when you're shooting free throws just to get you to miss.
That's wild. I'm sorry. That's
Yeah, I mean,
I can't believe that.
I'm,
What? I mean, I can, but
it's
like that's crazy.
yeah. I mean, I was like, what, this is. It was pretty unbelievable at the time, but now I'm just like, oh, that's pretty normal, I guess.
I think it's crazy that that's like normalized.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people in high school just aren't mature enough to understand like the actual repercussions of what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think classes like this are so important because it
Mhm.
really opens your eyes to how this really affects people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
If you just keep brushing it off, like it just like keeps happening to other people too.
Yeah.
Mm.
I was gonna say, I think this applies, but I played a lot of tennis growing up, and I think like the notion for tennis is kind of like it's like a skill based like upper class sport, and kind of going into the chapter and like seeing how like racial ideology, discrimination, and sport opportunities kind of like translate into the participation in the sport. Um, I mean, I could see at like my high school level, like it was very, very majority like white people. And I'd say I've kind of experienced like white privilege being able to play tennis and growing up with like the support and like the like social ideology that I like I can play. I can imagine like maybe someone else, who's maybe like African American, growing up and maybe getting these notions and being turned off from the idea of playing tennis. So I could definitely see like my own like white privilege come into play in tennis.
Yeah, and you can see that in professional tennis as well. You know, like there are very few professional like African American or Black athletes playing tennis, um, which is it's sad.
Yeah, and I don't know if y'all saw
And I
like,
know the ones that.
Hmm.
Go ahead.
no, you go first.
Okay. I know the ones like Serena Williams, like she experienced like a lot of racism and backlash because she was one of the minorities in tennis. So it's interesting to
Mhm.
think about that.
Yeah, this also kind of goes back to that Billie Jean King documentary that we watched. I thought it was interesting, like how she really pushed for like women's participation in tennis, but it was also interesting to see that there was like no focus on minority athletes in that. It was purely like white women who were playing tennis. Even though there's a huge push and like advance for women, there is no advance for the kind of like ingrained racism in the sport.
Why do you think there's still like a lack of minority representation in something like tennis today? Is it just because there's a lack of representation, then these minorities like don't
I
really
think
want to join anymore? Or is it because like, there are cultural barriers to them still? Or
I think it's a combination of both, probably. Yeah, I feel like I've kind of experienced that a little bit with basketball too. Like, growing up, of course, like I wanted to be in the NBA, but watching it, I was like, oh, there's literally not a single Asian kid in the NBA right now. So like that kind of subconsciously, I guess, turned me off to the idea. And I'm sure that happens for, just athletes, minority athletes who are looking to play tennis.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of the time.
No,
Go
you-
ahead.
I was just gonna say
Okay,
that,
I
like,
feel.
you go. Sorry.
Okay, it's okay. I feel like a lot of the times, like people, you base, like you see people in the media, and you're like, I want to be like them. Like I want to be, and like if you don't have someone that represents you playing that sport, then it's hard to like see yourself doing it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And like, I feel like also just kind of like the culture of like some families, like for example, I like know some people whose parents will like pay a lot of money to go into like sports. But since like,
Yeah.
yeah, my mom's like Asian and like she doesn't really put focus on that. So it was always kind of like a second thing. It's like education first and like sports next. Like you can play on like a free like sports team at school, but we don't want to shell out too much money for like a outside team or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that just kind of stopped you already from like getting the skills even needed to go into like these sports.
Yeah, so it's a cultural thing too.
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like personally, I don't have much experience with racism, white privilege in sport. Though I did notice, so I played baseball in high school, and on my team, it was basically all white people, and then a couple like half Hispanic, half white
Mhm.
people on my team, and then, but like, however, on the football team, it was probably like 75-80% black students, a couple Hispanic students, and then a couple white people on the team, which I did think was like really interesting. Like baseball and football are both like pretty popular sports in the US and in California and in my school. So like I just thought it was weird that there's such a discrepancy between the baseball and the football team, which like at the time I like didn't really, I never really thought about it, but like looking back at it, it's definitely like interesting to think about why that is. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
because like the black students were encouraged to play an aggressive sport like football, or like I really don't know why. If there's just some cultural barrier to baseball as compared to football, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, like, look at the different levels of baseball, because like professional baseball is like, you look at it and it's pretty diverse, but I think a lot of times at the high school level it gets less diverse. I think that either has to do with what you're saying about different cultures being, or different races being like kind of encouraged to play a certain sport, or it could have to do with like demographics and location, like where you're living, all the things like that.
We just passed the 25 mark, so yeah, we can continue. We can do whatever.
I actually have to get to class, so I'm
It's
gonna,
all good.
I need to leave. But
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. It was great talking to all of you.
All right. Yeah.
yeah, nice
Cool.
to meet you guys. Good stuff.
Nice
Yeah,
Oh
meeting
wait,
you.
nice to meet you guys
who's turning it in?